Good morning, everybody. Can I please have everybody's attention? Welcome to our first
Recess until the hour of 1:30 p.m.
okay, that's good to know.
House now stands in recess until 1:30 p.m.
So welcome to the first event being put on by the Permanent Status of Persons with Disabilities Commission, which is run by Imene, and I'm going to butcher her last name. So I'm just going to let Imene introduce herself very quickly.
Good morning, everyone. Sound check. Can everybody hear me? My name is Imene Bouziane Saidi. I'm Program Director of the Commission on the Status of Persons with Disabilities. I'm really happy and excited to see you all here today for this important conversation. We have members of the panel here that Carl will introduce, and then we can get started.
So I want to recognize two legislators that are in the room right now. Chair Garlick, who is the chair of the Permanent Status of Persons with Disabilities, and Representative Moriatu, who is also, I hope I didn't butcher your name, sir.
You did, but that's okay.
My name is Carl Richardson. I am the Massachusetts State House ADA Coordinator, where it's my role to help make the program, services, and activities here within the building accessible to everybody coming into the building. Like I said, this is our first event honoring Employment Disability Awareness Month. We have several events. We have one later today at 1, and then we have a couple tomorrow and a couple next week. I would suggest you go to our website to look at all the events and see how you may attend those events. Today, before we get started, I just want to go over a few house rules so that it's easier for everybody to be able to communicate and understand everybody. We will only allow one person to speak at a time, and when you speak, please state your name first for the purposes of identification so that we know who presented. And we will respect and listen to everybody's opinion. Thank you. So I'm just going to quickly go around and introduce my esteemed panelists who are going to talk about what it's like to work as a person with a disability in today's workforce. First, we have Kerry Thompson, who is the Senior Advisor to the Disability Rights Fund and the Executive Director of Silent Rhythm, which teaches salsa dancing to people with disabilities. And rumor has it there's a video of me dancing with my wife, but we're trying to quash that video. Then we have Thelma Williams, who is the Chief of Staff and the Chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Equal Opportunity Workforce at the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind. Then we have Patti Menzel, who is an advocate, a consultant, and a person on the spectrum who will talk about her work experiences. And then we have Steele, who is the Senior Director of Unified Communications for the Executive Office of Internet Technology Security. I may have butchered that too, so forgive me. But everybody will be talking about their unique experiences as a person with a disability. Everybody has at this table has a different background and different perspectives, and we will learn from all of them. I personally can't wait to hear everybody and what they bring to this panel. So first, we'll start off with Kerry Thompson, who identifies as a deaf-blind individual, and Kerry and I actually both have the same disability in that we both have Usher syndrome. Her vision is a little better than mine. Her hearing's a little different than mine, but we both have dual sensory loss, so I can't wait to learn from her. She's younger than I am, but I consider her a bit of a mentor because I always learn from her. So welcome, Kerry. And why don't you first start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your employment journey?
This is Kerry speaking. Thank you so much, Carl, and thank you everybody for this honor to be speaking before you all. As Carl just knows, we talked about our history a little bit, and as Carl mentioned, I'm a person with Usher syndrome, a form of deaf blindness. So my disability and my employment journey has been kind of an up and down. It's been a quest to find each mission, to each hurdle, each challenge, each round around the bend has been constant and nonstop. And if you may hear a little bit of a Southern accent, I'm originally from Louisiana. So my disability employment journey began back in Louisiana. And what happened was nobody would hire me in Louisiana after I graduated from college. And even though having some student assistant experience, nobody would hire me. Some would say, I would love to hire you, but I want somebody who can talk on the phone like a normal person. And I just knew if I wanted a better life for myself, if I wanted more opportunities, that I needed to go to them and not wait for them to come to me. So I flipped a quarter, had New York City, here's Boston. And so Boston it was. And my first job was at Brigham and Women's Hospital. Then I worked there for a few years. Prior to that, I was doing a couple of temp jobs while trying to find the right job. And it wasn't easy. You try to explain during interviews that you can't hear, that you communicate a little differently from others. Then after working for Brigham and Women's Hospital for a few years, I went back to school for my master's at Harvard University. And from there, I have spent the last 15 years working for Disability Rights Fund. And even if Disability Rights Fund is an organization about advancing disability rights and human rights, I always say that we are still learning about how we need to do better by disability rights. And there's always so many things to learn and improve on. Inclusion and accessibility is not static, it is dynamic. And it means that we need to all be part of cultivating that and learning how we can always do better. So I will stop right here and give it back to Carl.
So, Kerry, what, in your opinion, can employers do to make a more inclusive work environment for people with disabilities?
This is Kerry again. There are many things. It's a process. It starts with recruitment, that the advertisement or position shouldn't be thinking about the general public. A person should really look at the job description and really analyze, is it necessary that somebody has to lift 50 pounds? Is it necessary that somebody needs to be able to move around? Like really think about the job description. A lot of it is really old and outdated and no longer needed or valid. So recruitment, job descriptions needs to change. That's one place to start. The next part is making sure that once a person with a disability is hired, that they feel that their needs are, they have an opportunity, an open space to discuss their needs during orientation and throughout the process. And they need to make sure that the work environment feels like a good place for them to do their job to the best performance they can. They also need to also have commitment from their team. We often sometimes think about inclusive workforce needs to be something that one person's job to take care of the accessibility, one person's job to do this. It's a team effort. It needs to be from top to bottom. It needs to have leadership buy-in. It needs to feel that the individual who needs support isn't the one that has to carry the burden of requesting, securing, and getting the support that someone else is going to say, you need captioning for your staff meeting? No problem. I'm going to go ahead and request it with the Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing instead of saying, you need captioning? Okay, go ahead and get one. And you don't know, is it your responsibility? I've always felt that burden for many years, but that has shifted at my organization of Disability Rights Fund, that they understood better that it shouldn't be just the responsibility of the person with a disability to get what they need. It needed to be a team effort. It's also just important that we understand that disability should be included through the communication, that the entire team needs to be sending out accessible emails, be sending out accessible documents, that people are using empowering language and not ableist language and referring to people with disabilities. And it just means that again, it's a team effort and making sure that we also, as I said, disability and accessibility can be very dynamic. And it's also important for the workforce to understand what's out there, what's the latest technology. That everybody on the team understands how Microsoft Teams work and how Zoom work, and make sure that they are familiar with setting up the accessibility feature, because we always know nobody wants to be the Zoom host. Nobody wants to deal with that part, but at some point, each of us will probably be the one leading a Zoom or virtual meeting, and it would be good for us all to learn what does accessibility look like in the virtual as well as the physical space. Back to you, Carl.
So my final question is, since we both have ushered, I know I'm going through some change in my hearing and vision over the past several years have gotten significantly worse. And how can employers meet people with disabilities whose changes may change over time?
Mhm. This is Kerry again. It's important that we look at disability again, the dynamic. And for people like Carl and myself, our disability changes over time. There are other people with disabilities who have disabilities that are part of age-related conditions, that it could be glaucoma, could be arthritis, and so forth. In the past, we've always seemed to have this mindset that once you get to this point in your disability, that you have to retire, that you're no longer valuable to the workforce, and that needs to change. What can we have so many options now, so many more resources, so many technologies, so many ways of communicating. Yes, the way we've done things in the past may change. And for me, for myself, as Carl mentioned, like, my eyesight changed so much in the last couple of years. It happened during the pandemic. So right before the pandemic, I could see pretty well. But then during the pandemic, my eyesight changed so dramatically that I was a little caught off guard with how much I still needed to learn. I still was trying to get more fluent in Braille. I was still trying to learn tactile sign language now in a world where people didn't want to touch. I had to learn how to use all this new equipment, Braille displays and screen readers that's not necessarily easy for someone with a hearing loss to also maneuver. And I was honored to be one of the commissioners on the status of persons with disabilities from Massachusetts. But I made the hard decision of stepping down because I couldn't do everything and manage this new phase in my life where these changes were happening. I needed to take the time to learn how to adapt. I'm very grateful to my organization, Disability Rights Fund, for allowing me the grace and space to find the new path that I need to take, the new adaptive equipment that I need, and just giving me a lot more flexibility. So I think that is really one thing that's very important for the workforce, is to be flexible instead of saying, you can no longer do this, okay, goodbye. Back to you, Carl.
This is Carl. I would agree that one of the important points that I think Kerry's making is that, well, we all know we're facing a labor workforce shortage today. So I do think we have to be more flexible, and we're doing that to people in general, allowing people to work remotely and allowing them to do things that'll make them more productive employees. So the same model needs to be taken with people with disabilities. Because I want to allow everybody time to talk. But one other thing I wanted to say, Kerry is a very humble person. In her job, she advocates for people with disabilities all over the world and interact with people globally, and is considered a leader in the disability world. So I personally want to thank her for being that, an advocate on behalf of all of us.
Oh, thank you, Paul. That's so nice of you to say. I'm just an ally. I just want to be part of the movement and do my part for myself and for others.
Thank you, Kerry. Well, I'm sure we'll get back to you when we open it up for questions. Next is Thelma Williams. She's the Chief of Staff for the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind, as well as the Chair of the Diversity, Equal Opportunity, and Equity workforce at the Commission for the Blind. So Thelma,
Yes.
you and I have known each other, I think, for about 15 years. And is it fair to say that, just like Kerry's, your needs have changed over time? And have you always felt comfortable advocating for yourself? Well, first, give us a little bit of background, whatever you're comfortable sharing, and then have you always felt comfortable as a person with a disability advocating for your needs and rights as an employee?
Thank you, Carl. Thelma speaking. So Carl, it's the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee.
Thank you. I'm pushing everything today, but
No problem. So I've been with the commission for 15 years. Prior to that, I worked for DMH for about 7 years. I've also worked in housing, Brookline Housing Authority, and done a few other things. I am challenged with a condition called Charcot-Marie Tooth, also referred to as CMT. It is a neurological condition that is progressive. 8 years ago, I did not use a cane. I did not wear the braces that I have on today. I also use a rollator, which I did not bring today. CMT affects individuals in their feet, their legs, their hands, and their arms. At this point in my life, I've lost 100% of the nerve sensation in my hands. Also, my feet, I lost sensation about 20 years ago. Hence why I wear the braces. They prevent me from falling. So I guess you could say my condition was a hidden disability. And that being the case, I was very reluctant, and I'll say embarrassed, to ask for help. I have often been misunderstood because folks didn't know what was going on, why I fell a lot, I tripped. I just started wearing the braces about 1.5 years ago. That resulted from me nearly being hit by a SUV. Fell in a parking lot at a mall, and people helped me up. And at that point, I said, this is got to stop. Safety over vanity. And I've been wearing them ever since, and it's the best decision that I've ever made. And I have to say too, it has empowered me to advocate for myself more. So I'll answer your question now, Carl. I think I'm very good at advocating for others. I'm learning to advocate for myself more. I'll just give you some examples of some things that I've done. A few years ago, well, more than a few years ago, I advocated for a place where I was working to get handicapped parking spaces in front of the building. And that took about 2 years, but I was able to get 3. And when they were finally put in front of the building, I think a month later, I got another job. So I advocated not only for myself, but for others as well. I was also responsible for getting Sorrison, which is a device that's used for deaf-blind people. In the career center that I was working at, it was the first in the state to have it, and I suppose other career centers have them now. I've also advocated, and I'm trying to be, I'm not going to mention the places where I've worked and where I've done these things other than the career center. Also responsible for advocating for 20,000 plus people in
when you say 20, this is Carl, when you say 20,000, you mean constituents of the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind?
Well, I wasn't going to mention we.
Okay. Well, I'm one of your constituents, so.
Yes.
So I'm comfortable saying that as a client of the Massachusetts
Yeah.
Commission for the
It
Blind.
was the Commission for the Blind as well as my coworkers.
Got it.
And it was very risky, but I did it and with excellent results.
And as chief of staff, how many So it's cheap. How many employees work for the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind?
I think right now roughly 130.
So you're a person with a disability who is the chief of staff that has a department that has 130 people, individuals. The only reason I bring that up is just because I want people to realize that her job is not a small job. It's a big job. She's a person with a disability overseeing, you know, helping the Commission for the Blind to provide services for up to 20,000 patrons of the Mass Commission for the Blind and overseeing a staff of 130 people. And so I just wanted to point that out, that people with disability can lead productive work.
Yes, we can.
Do you feel like you've ever been overlooked for a promotion, or your job career growth has been hurt by your disability?
Yes, I personally feel that I have been overlooked. I can give examples without getting into details. One in particular that was quite obvious, another one that I really could not prove. I remember going for a position and I was told by someone, you can't do that job. It involves traveling and going to a lot of meetings outside of the building. That was very disturbing to hear that from this individual. My response to them was, have you not heard of reasonable accommodations? I did apply for the job despite what this person said to me. I did not get it. Not quite sure why I didn't, if it was because of my disability, but that was okay. I just proved to that person that, you know, just because you're saying these very mean words to me, doesn't mean that I'm going to stop and give up. I'm going to keep trying.
Great. Well, thank you, Thelma. I think you gave some good insight, and we'll move on to Patti. Patti Menzel, who is an advocate, a consultant, and work in the field of the autism community. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you feel is the best part of working?
Thank you, Carl. Here is Patti Menzel. I got a very late in life diagnosis with my autism. So I haven't always had the best support. While I was at midlife and had my diagnosis is when I began working. I was very, very fortunate that someone saw me speaking for the YMCA to explain how swimming at the YMCA helps with my sensory processing and my life skills and executive functioning. And because I have such a discrepancy between my how I seem with my ability to speak and my fragile reactive neurology, it was offered to me to be able to explain my experience to educators, to law enforcement, to clinicians, and to parapros. So now, and I'm connected with a lot of groups for autistic adults. So we kind of all discuss our situation and solutions and things like that. But I think I've been working now for about maybe 5 to 7 years. I'm not sure when I started, but I'm tremendously grateful for the opportunity to present, to do consultations, classroom observations, things like that. I would say the positives for working are, I think, empowerment for one. The money is not a bad thing, but it's certainly empowerment and the sense of having purpose, the ability to give back is so important. It's tremendously important to feel that I can contribute and support others. For me, that's very important. And the human connection. And maybe because I've made some really great connections with the people I've worked with and for. Maybe the best part of it is the sense of belonging. People on the spectrum don't always feel that we fit in, and it's more important to belong than it is to fit in. And that's what happens with work, is you get a sense of belonging. It's true inclusion when you're able to have an opportunity to contribute and give back.
Patty, this is Carl. Can you give us examples of some of the type of employment you've done over the past 5 to 7 years?
Yes, Carl, thank you. I really enjoy speaking with parapros. I do professional development where, where they close the school for the day and all the paras are in a room and the special ed department is there. And I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to help present. I have a couple of PowerPoints that I've designed around education and things like that. I enjoy that. I like to support clinicians that are interested in autism. I've worked for South Shore Hospital and several other hospitals, Schriver Medical, and parents. I really have a soft spot for parents. I feel that many of them just have to fight so hard to try to get the things that they need for their children and to fight to be heard and to advocate for their child and not knowing what the resources are. And a lot of the times I don't have answers to some of the things that they need, but I can always refer them to a resource or an agency or a colleague that would know more. But I have such a soft spot for the parents. And I would say the last thing that's really important to me is when I can speak with those on the spectrum and just kind of be a sounding board. And we can kind of put our heads together, come up with solutions and strategies. And it's always a good time when we're together. So I really appreciate the opportunity to support people.
This is Carl, Patty. You're not off the hook yet.
Okay.
So the numbers in those on the spectrum in the autism community continue to grow. And we want to make sure that everybody in society feel valued and has something to provide to society. What type of employment opportunities do you think are good for people who may be on the spectrum?
Thank you, Carl. I would say rather than specific sectors, for example, it would probably best be whatever environment is good for the person, with both balancing, supporting their challenges. In other words, giving the person the space, time, and quiet they need for mental processing demands, language processing demands, being able to socialize in a way that can be recognized as trying to connect with others. And also something that really engages the person's passions. I think that's when things really flow. So I think finding something that aligns with somebody's passions is really important.
And this will be a question, this is Carl, this will be a question I'll go back and ask the other panelists when we're done hearing from all the panelists, but do you often disclose ahead of time or do you wait? How do you handle disclosure of your disability? That's
a really great question. When it comes to work, well, my autism is, I guess it's pretty obvious. It kind of shows up and introduces itself, whether I want it to or not. I often have a support worker with me. When I don't, I tend to wander and I always end up in a boiler room somewhere where there's like pipes and stuff. So I'm not sure why. I'm really lucky I got here today. But yeah, so I would say that working has been a tremendously wonderful experience for me. And I would say, sorry, lost the question. Is it the best thing about working?
No, the question, this is Carl, if you don't mind, I'll repeat it. Do you feel comfortable disclosing your disability?
Yeah, I think that it's for myself, I think it's very obvious I'm already autistic by the time I get somewhere. When it comes to personal relationships that are not, that are maybe even work related, but they don't know. It's a tightrope to walk because you don't know how the other person is going to respond. You don't know whether or not they're going to pathologize and infantilize or just look at strengths, or whether or not they're just going to accept you as a person. Because socially, it's not a diagnosis as much as it's an identity. It's who you are. And there's always the identity before the diagnosis. But at work, it's kind of already, I think they already know I'm autistic anyway.
Great, thank you. I'm sure we'll be circling back to all the panelists, but I want to give Brad a few minutes to, and then I am going to open up with some round robin questions that I think all of us can contribute to. But Brad, you are the Director of Unified Communication for the Executive Office of Technology Services and Security for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I'll ask some follow-up questions.
Hi, Brad Steele from the Executive Office of Technology Services and Security. You nailed it, Carl.
Finally, I nailed something right.
I have been with the Commonwealth for 15 years and have been sitting on procurements with OSD and representing ITD, Mass IT, and now EOTSS in those procurements over 15 years. And I manage the enterprise voice, call center, and cellular offerings from the Executive Office of Technology Services and Security. And about 8 years ago, I had a direct boss of mine who was a very soft-spoken individual. And I found myself asking about 10 times in a one-on-one meeting, maybe 20 times, "I'm sorry, could you repeat yourself? Excuse me," and those things. And actually, while on a trip to take my mother-in-law to her audiologist, I asked the gentleman, "Could you do a hearing test?" And he did the hearing test and disclosed that I do have significant hearing loss within the vocal range of people speaking. Now, it's not significant. I can hear basic things around me, and I can acknowledge when people are speaking and those things, but it's with the clarity of hearing the person and the details of the person. And so I, at that point, had to accept, and I think that two of the people that have spoken prior mentioned vanity. I had to get over my own vanities and actually accept the fact I have very short hair and that I was going to wear hearing aids. And what's remarkable about that is I mention my hearing aids every once in a while, and people say, "Oh, I didn't even notice." So I should not have been so vain. And it has been a remarkable change in my life. And I just want to add a personal item. I'm also a musician. I play guitar and sing. And it is unbelievable the difference in what I can hear in music wearing my hearing aids. And it is a significant change in my quality of life by accepting that and accepting the hearing aids.
So 8 years ago, this is Carl, 8 years ago, you started to notice a change, and you started to do something about dealing with your hearing loss by getting the hearing aids and thing. So two-part question. One, now it's fairly obvious that you wear hearing aids. Do you feel like your coworkers treat you any differently? And secondly, what kind of reasonable accommodations have you done within the workplace?
So this is Brad. I think that for the most part, people are very accepting of the fact that I tend to ask them to, make sure they're speaking clearly, make sure they're facing me when they're speaking to me, and those kind of things. And in my personal life, I will tell you that, getting my wife and my family to accept and to make adjustments has been, a big improvement in, again, my quality of life. I have not needed any direct assistance at work other than those things that I have in my personal life. So I use the hearing aids that I have are USB compatible. And I use an iPhone because of the accessibility that is naturally built into the iPhones. And that is something that I'm aware of because of my position at the state and had done research to help someone who had previously acknowledged their situation to me. And I did research, so I had that knowledge of the technology that was out there. I put that in place so that everything that happens on my iPhone happens in my hearing aids. In addition, with the hearing aids that I have, there's assistive technology with my television at home and with the computers that I have that tie directly into my hearing aids. In addition, again, because of my position, I know a lot about the different technologies, and I use a speaker when I'm not in a crowded room, as opposed to using just the laptop speaker. I have an external speaker similar to the one that's on the table here today, so that I can hear and speak and be heard better. And I really enjoy one of the things that for 15 years with the state, as I said, I sat on a lot of procurements, and accessibility has always been one of the items that I strived for coming over from Avaya prior to my work at the state. We had a strong accessibility practice within Avaya, and it's something that I've strived for. And now I found myself kind of full circle and taking advantage of some of the technology that I strived for within those procurements.
This is Carl, the reason I asked Brad about reasonable accommodation, one of the things I think employers have a concern of is providing reasonable accommodations, that it's going to be cost prohibitive and expensive. And that's not usually the case. According to the Job Accommodation Network, reasonable accommodation for the average employee sometimes costed on the average less than $100. So it depends, on the individual. Someone like myself, it's probably a couple $1,000 by the time you give me a screen reader and some assistive listening devices. But someone like Thelma, she just needs a place, and she just needs accessible pathways of travel, and clear hallways. And Brad, you heard Brad say, so accommodations are not always expensive. They're not always hard. Sometimes they're easy. And if you're in the position of hiring and decision making, and you're not sure what to do in terms of reasonable accommodation, simply ask the individual with the disability. They are the subject matter experts and incredible problem solvers, because they have to be just to get through their day as a person with a disability. So I'm gonna just throw out some questions, and some of you may have already answered them, some of you have not. But if you want to answer them, fine. Everybody, I think, here has admitted, well, at this point, that they have disclosed. So I was originally going to ask a question about whether you disclosed, but I think with all of us, maybe with the exception of Brad, a little bit, it's fairly obvious that, I have a cane, 2 hearing aids. Kerry has a dog. Thelma now is using a brace with a cane. So it's fairly obviously, so the question of disclosure is no longer an issue, but we all struggled with it in the past. Particularly, Thelma mentioned that she wasn't always open. I wasn't always open. I thought for many years I was fooling people. And it turned out I was not. The people just thought I was not as sharp and aware of my environment. Maybe I was, doing drugs or something. I don't know. I wasn't. But people, because when you can't hear or see, people just made assumptions. And once I disclosed, those assumptions went away. So But disclosure is a highly individual, private thing, and it's up to each individual to disclose. So I don't want to say, but in the case of here, I think it helped all of us. So I do have a question for Kerry, Thelma, and Patti. What type of assistive technology or reasonable accommodation do you use in your day-to-day job?
This is Kerry speaking. I can go first if you want to just go in the order.
Yes, that's
you
fine.
did. What don't I use is probably an easier answer, but I use captioning. I use a lot of different apps on my iPhone. Auto.ai is a really good speech to text app that sometimes when the do captions, the auto caption aren't easy for me to see, I can use the Auto.ai app. I use sign language interpreters and tactile interpreters and pro-tactile interpreters. I'm now trying to learn how to use a Braille display after spending several years learning how to use Braille. I'm trying to learn how to use a screen reader, not because I need to listen to the screen reader, but I need to learn how the screen reader works in order to use a Braille display. I'm learning, I guess another technology that I just started using is a cochlear implant. I got that during the pandemic, so there were many changes. And I don't know if many of you realize that I did have a guide dog until Carl mentioned that Kerry has a guide dog that makes it fairly obvious of disclosing her disability, but my guide dog is also new. So there's been a lot of new changes. And I also incorporated training as part of a reasonable accommodation for work, meaning that as I'm trying to adapt to new technology and new assistive devices, I need time to get training on these things in order to help me in my job. So I've been able to get some training through the Mass Commission for the Blind, through Perkins Access, and some directly funded by my organization. So all of those have been really helpful. I always say that it's really good to get as many tools as you can in your tool belt, and then take out that tool when you need it.
Okay, thank you, Kerry. Thelma, do you use any accommodations or assistive technology in your day-to-day job?
Okay, Carl, thank you. This is Thelma speaking. I'll have to say that I'm a late bloomer. It took me a while to accept my disability because it is so progressive. But at this point in my life, it's becoming even more progressive. So one of the issues that I'm having now because of the nerve damage in my hands is typing. Yeah, it's becoming every day more and more difficult because I can't feel. So I am exploring some type of assistive device to help me with that. Other than that, no.
I hope you know some AT or VR specialists.
Yes, yeah.
This is Carl. Patti, what kind of accommodation do you use in your day-to-day work?
Thank you, Carl. This is Patti Menzel. I started a few years ago to use something called an AAC, that stands for Assistive and Augmentative Communication Device. I have speech now, but I don't always have speech. And an AAC app is something that is on my iPad mini, which is small enough to fit in my backpack. And what it does when I hit the buttons on the iPad is it'll speak for me. I have to have the volume up. It will speak for me, and I can, yes, you can type out something and kind of custom what you want to say, but you can also just hit pictures that will help to express what you need to express or ask what you need to ask. I'm not using my AAC when I'm stressed and I'm having a hard time, that's when my speech is going to shut off. because I have found that with my fragile reactive neurology, I tend to pitch the iPad. Those things are heavy. So, and I can't see that coming. So that's good for me to use in a situation where everything's quiet before things get too hectic. I may be able to use my iPad to express something, even when I do have speech at that point. And I do find that using that iPad, using that AAC app tends to cause people around me to speak slower, quieter, and to be calmer. And that helps me a lot. The other adaptive equipment that I use is a living adaptive equipment. I have a service dog who prevents me from bolting and wandering. He does not go to work with me at the moment because he task trains perfectly. He does tasking perfectly, but we're having a training issue. We need kind of a retrain right now. It's very young. And I got him kind of during when the pandemic started. But I would say that my life is much better having his help, and I'm much safer.
Thank you. And Brad, you already touched on some of the ATDE, the external speaker, the hearing aid microphones. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Just that, again, from the research that I've done in the position that I have, there was a time when it came to hearing and visual, assistive technology that it was dragging, and that's it. But with all of the technology changes in the last, especially the last 5 years, there are so many things. And Kerry mentioned, AI and those things. There is a lot out there that you can take advantage of. And as you said, Carl, it is not always very expensive. A lot of it is freeware. A lot of it is available for a very minimal fee. But as I said earlier, the investment that I made has repaid itself 1,000 times in my quality of life. So it is worth it. And the one item that I do want to touch on is I'm shocked that there is not more assistance given to people to get technology in their life, to get hearing aids. I'm lucky enough to be on a good insurance plan, and it did pay for a portion of the hearing aids, but it was still an exorbitant amount of money. In speaking to other folks that I've talked to over the years, it's amazing to me that insurance companies don't cover hearing aids, and either not at all or very minimally. And I think that that's something that we should advocate for, because it is such a simple thing to improve people's quality of life and their ability to function.
Thank you. So I'm gonna ask one last question of each of the panelists, and then we'll open it up to the floor and the community if anybody has any questions. So if you could have the people who are watching or in the room take away one point that you want to make sure that they're imparted with, what would it be? And we're going to go in reverse order this time, so Brad doesn't always go last. So Brad, you're first.
Okay, Brad Steele. The one thing that I would say to folks, and it's really a two-part thing, and it is that you're not alone. And when I say that, first of all, you're not alone in the fact that you have something that you need assistance with. We are all imperfect beings, and so we all have things that we need help with. So don't feel that vanity or that shyness or inadequacy. Take advantage of those things around you that can help make your life better. It's worth it. The second part that I would say is you're not alone. There are people, and they're sitting here at this table, and there's the Commission Against Discrimination, there's a Commission for the Blind. There are other opportunities within the state and within the communities to help you. And we need to make sure that you reach out to these folks and take advantage of the services. They're there. And it, like I said, will make your quality of life better if you take advantage and you get the help that you deserve.
This is called Patty. Is there one thing you want to make sure that the audience goes home with in terms of anything you want to make sure they learn?
Thank you, Carl. This is Patty. Yes, I would say that when you meet someone who seems very different and it's clear they have some disabilities and maybe they need a whole lot of support, even with basic things, I would say consider that they also want to be able to contribute and they also want to be able to give back, and that we're all stronger together. So please consider hiring people that are different and that have disabilities.
Thank you, Patty. Thelma,
Yes.
same question goes to you. What would you like the community to leave with? What wisdom would you like them to leave with?
Piggyback on what Brad and Patty just said, and to add to that, that we are not looking for handouts, individuals with disabilities. We don't want to be looked upon as complainers. We're advocates for ourselves or for others, and we should not be looked upon that way as a whiner or a complainer or a rebel riser. We have a lot to contribute. Just look at all the people who are sitting at this table, the different roles, the different positions that we have, meaningful roles. We are passionate about helping people. So when I say we don't want handouts, we're not complainers, we just want empathy. And that's been stated before, empathy, understand. None of us are perfect. At any point in time, anyone in this room who you think you don't have a disability could have a disability when you walk out this door. Something could happen to you. So that's what I'd like to do.
This is Carl. One thing I want to add to Thelma's point is, unlike other minorities, whether you're a woman, person of color, gender, person of color, sexual orientation, religious background, other types of identity, a person with a disability is something you can join at any time. And it's not always in your control. And so, in accordance to the latest census from 2020, as many as 20% of people in this country, that's 1 in 5 people, have a disability. So we do need to figure out a way to be more inclusive and make everybody feel valued and be a part of society. Kerry, you get to have the last word in terms of, and then we will open up a question. But if there's one thing you want the audience to take home with them, what would it be?
This is Kerry speaking. I guess one thing to repeat from what I said earlier, the key takeaway is just really emphasizing that disability inclusion is a team effort. And just on that last point, of Thelma's point and your point, Carl, was just also, I want to make sure that we are looking at who is still being left behind. And we want to move them forward into move forward motion, not left behind, move forward. In fact, I don't want it to be just move forward, but lead forward. I want to see more opportunity for people with disabilities, not just to be in the workforce, but to take the lead, to be the leaders.
Great, thank you. We have a few more minutes, so I will open it up to, I'm going to have Imene be the facilitator because she can see who's raising hand, both either virtually or here. So if anybody has any questions, please let Imene know and we'll take your question.
This is Imene. Before we move on to questions, we'd like to recognize Representative Rodney Elliott here has joined us. And we'll start taking questions from members of the audience here in person and on Zoom.
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm Richard Rodriguez, the ADA coordinator for Steele belongs. I have a number of disabilities, learning disability, hearing problem. Sometimes get upset, people being sensitive, people disabled. particularly, I have a hearing problem and I'm going to need a hearing aid. When I ask someone to repeat themselves, they get upset, they get nasty, or they raise their voice, How do you handle that? And how do you educate that person to be sensitive?
I just want to make sure, does everybody hear that question?
This is Kerry speaking. I need the voice interpreter to appear. Some of it was missed in the caption, so. Yeah, voice, but-
The question was about feeling reactive when people react badly to asking someone to repeat themselves. How do you educate people to react more positively when you ask, for example, for them to repeat themselves?
So is there anybody here? This is Carl. Is there anybody on this panel that would like to take that question?
This is Kerry. I can go because I just did that exactly. Asking a repeat of that. I think it's just important that you stand tall and know that it is not you, it is them that is the one that has the issue. If you ask them to repeat themselves and they're not able to say, I really value what you have to say, and I want to make sure that it is clear to me what you just said. So maybe that's just a little advice to remind the person that you value what they have to say. If they react badly or negatively, then basically they're saying that they don't value their own words.
This is Carl. I'll just say one more thing. I often ask people to repeat themselves. And the way I phrase it often is, if you want me to be able to contribute fully to the conversation, I have to understand what you're saying. And I would like to be able to contribute fully because I'm sure what you're asking me or telling me is important. And I want to be able to give you back the same thoughtfulness that you gave me, but I need to understand what you're saying so that I can do that correctly and participate fully. And I don't know how to say this, but at some point you have to not care what people think. and just do the best you can.
This is Thelma speaking. I don't have a hearing impairment, but I wear the braces, and sometimes I have the rollator, and other times the walker, the cane. So coming here today, I got a lot of stares. I get stares all the time. Sometimes people will ask, "What's wrong with you?"
Yeah.
Or I had someone say to me a couple of months ago at 600 Washington Street, "How long are you going to be wearing those?" It's like, first of all, it's none of your business. Second of all, as Carl just stated, I hold Kerry, I think Kerry said, I hold my head up high and I smile. And that's what I was doing as I got off the ride and I was coming up the elevator and so forth. People were staring and I had a big smile. "Hello, how are you today?" To take the focus off the braces. I'm a person. I'm not identified by the braces. I'm a person. You didn't look at the person next to me that way or with this look on your face. So I know exactly what you're saying. And I must say, it's nice to meet you. We've talked quite a few times over the phone about some functions. I used to be the regional director for the Northeast area, and I covered Salem and Lawrence. So I remember talking to you about
Northeast of what?
Northeast area of Massachusetts.
Oh, okay.
So Lawrence was my area. So it's very nice to meet you for the first time. Yes.
Carl, this is Brad. The one item that I have is, it's funny, you mentioned about disclosure earlier. When I'm asking someone to repeat themselves and I can see them getting frustrated, that's when I usually tilt my ear forward so that they can see my hearing aid. And for the most part, that does appease people. But I think it's sometimes that, as I think it was Kerry who said, that's, as much on them as it is on you. their impatience is thinking, oh, you should be able to hear me. Once they realize, oh, I can't necessarily hear you, then they become much more self-aware, and they'll speak more slowly, they'll speak louder. And I will tell you that the pandemic with people wearing masks was very difficult for me. You know, again, being able to point that out and show people, it really, you know, it helped them be aware and help them adapt. And for the most part, people did adapt and were more kind about it. Not always, but for the most part.
Do we have any more questions?
This is Imene. We have one question. Oh, sorry, Patty, did you want to
Yeah,
answer?
I was
the
just
question?
going to offer one more thing, Carl.
Yeah.
Quickly, is
Yes.
that I have central auditory processing disorder as part of my autism. So what people say comes in jumbled, it's in pieces. So I do have to say what. And when somebody is getting frustrated with my what, I will say, I will kind of take the bull by the horns and say to them, I listen slower. And that gives it to them to then find their empathy and think about a way to communicate with me. And it kind of calms them down a little bit when they're frustrated. And I want them to feel comfortable, but it gives them something to think about. And so that way we can come together. I'll tell them, I listen slower.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. This is Imene. We have one question on the Zoom. Marilyn Andrews made a comment. I want to commend you all for your insight. Can you share some ideas for accessibility for job applications and job orientation?
How much time do we have?
We have 5 minutes.
No, I know. Well, first of all, my boss in this room is, I have not looked for work anytime recently. But accessibility of applications and is a challenge. And I don't even know how to begin to answer that, to be honest with you. Different websites are more accessible than others. Sometimes you may need to ask for help in filling out an application. And when you go, one thing I will say is when you do go to a job interview, try to take control of the job interview. Don't have them focused on what you can't do, but have them focused on what you can do. So when you walk into a job interview, say, well, let's say you're applying for a marketing position to market a certain product. Already have a marketing plan in your head and go in and say, well, this is how I would market your product. I would do this, and this. And they're not going to get a chance to ask you a question. Well, how are you going to do that? Because you can't see. If you go in and focus on your talent and your ability, and you make people forget you have a disability, that's the strongest thing. I will also say, I think it's important to do 2 more things in terms of the job search. One, have a mentor. Nobody gets, even people without disabilities, many of them get gainful employment by having mentors and networking. In fact, I would argue that most successful people, with or without a disability, do it by having mentors and learning from their mentors and seeing what their mentors did successfully and not so successfully, and 2, by networking. I got this job because I networked with people at a career center who then put me in touch with an ADA coordinator who then learned more about me and what my skills and talents were and thought that I could transfer those to this position. And that was through networking, making phone calls. When you are looking for work, if you are looking for work, treat it like a full-time job. Okay, and focus on your talent and your abilities, because everybody, and I truly believe this with all my heart of heart, everybody has talent and abilities and something to give. And that's going to be my 1 point for everybody to take home today. the application process is not always fully accessible and easy, so you may need help. And so reach out if you are part of a, MC Mass Commission for the Blind or Mass Commission for the Deaf or Mass Rehab Commission. Reach out to those organizations and see if they have resources and things that can help you. Reach out to your local job career center. Find a mentor who can help you and network.
Thank you, Carl. This is Imene. We have time for one more answer if somebody wants to answer the question.
I'd like to go back to the question that was asked about reasonable accommodations. And I don't know why I was thinking that it wasn't a form of reasonable accommodations, but it is. Since the pandemic, COVID, a lot of us have been working from home. Some of us still are doing hybrid. For my condition, that has been the ultimate healing thing for me. There is no cure for the position that I have, and there is no medicine for the pain that I have, the chronic pain. Prior to that, I wished I had the ability to work from home, even one day a week. I have requested reasonable accommodations. There you go. I guess it is reasonable accommodations, where I don't have to go back into the office at all. But I do. I have good days, I have bad days. So that's been a wonderful, reasonable accommodation that I have now that I didn't have in the past. Another is advocacy. Like I said, I'm great at advocating for others, and I'm learning to do so much better for myself. I advocated to get a bill in my name with the legislature. It's the legislative sick leave bank. But what I want to say about that is, I didn't know that was available. I had no clue that it was available. And what I went through to find out that it was available was really sad. I guess I understand why it's not shared a lot, because there are some abusers. But for someone like me, and it's documented, medically documented, that the only thing that really helps with my position is rest. My condition is rest. I should not have had to jump through hoops. So I guess what I'm saying is, we need to really look at policies and laws like that, that prohibit people like myself for being able to be more productive in the workforce. And be transparent about what's out there for us.
Okay, I'm going to thank you, Thelma. This is Carl. I'm going to wrap it up. So a couple of things. One, I want to thank everybody on this panel for sharing their experiences and their work and everything they've done to make the workforce a more diverse, inclusive environment, and to not only making the workforce more inclusive, but to being productive employees that provide a lot to the employees and also to society. So the two things I want to say is, one, you see at this table, 5 of us who all have different disabilities, but yet we all have varying different jobs that impact the lives, well, that impact the places we work in a positive manner, and that also hopefully impact the lives of people that we work with and serve in a positive manner. So if you are in a position of hiring, please do consider opening up your listing to people with disabilities. You may have to be a little more creative in terms of recruitment and accommodation, but I think that you'll find that the problem-solving ability of people with disabilities is better, because we problem solve just on a daily basis to get around our disability. That the retention for people with disabilities, employees for people with disabilities, is probably longer, because many of us are, I don't want to use the word grateful, but we're happy to be gainfully employed and produce and provide, and that we can be fully productive and active So thank you for taking the time to listen to our panel. I hope you all got something from this, and I'm sure many of us will be available when this is over to talk to you and interact with you if you have any questions. Thank you.
Carl, this is Imene. Someone has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry,
I have a question. I just wanted to take one moment to represent Madam Chair Kerry. But I also wanted to thank you. My name is Rodney Elliott, I'm State Representative from Lowell. I spent 24 years in the Lowell City Council. Several of those years, I was a designee to the Lowell Disability Commission. I congratulate you on your advocacy and your efforts. You're an important part of every community across the Commonwealth, especially in my community of Lowell. And I was proud to bring messages from the Disability Commission to the Lowell City Council. Advocacy for things like cuts, closed caption television, for our regulatory boards, people to participate. So I'm sorry I was a little late. I was at another committee meeting, but I'm glad I was able to come here and join you to listen, to learn. And this was a very good learning experience for us to make decisions on your behalf, especially during a time where, there are jobs. And it's just, as Carl mentioned very eloquently, how do you find it? It's not easy, whether you have a disability or not. And I thought that was an important message. So I just wanted to take just a minute of time to thank you and appreciate all the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Rep.
Thank you, Representative. All right, well, thank you. I want to eat some food.